Okay, Steve Taylor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark.
Steve, I was thinking about it the other day that the last time we did an interview like this, sad to say, was 38 years ago.
Oh,
We've talked since then, of course, but I was writing for a Japanese magazine of all things, and I interviewed you for that at Knott's Berry Farm, 1987. Well, that's how old
wow.
we all are.
Yes. So
Uh,
it was printed in Japanese?
It was printed in Japanese. That was your first Japanese interview, I guess. Then it also
I
ran
think
in
it
my
was.
my college paper. But man, that's how far back we go. And you were wearing a crazy suit back then, of course, as you're probably going to do again when you go out on tour. Uh, but
Yeah.
but
Maybe.
you've had so many careers. So I think we need to somehow start at the beginning of all this. A musician, film director, probably film producer, writer, et cetera, et cetera. But where did you get your start, and how did you get into media?
I went to our mutual, what do you call it if you only go for 1 year to a college?
Yeah,
You don't
what do
get
you
to call it
call
your
them?
alma mater.
Well, I think you should still call it your alma mater.
Okay, sure. So I went to Biola for my freshman year, and I grew up in Denver. My dad had gone to the Bible Institute of Los Angeles when it was still downtown. He was very excited for me to go to Biola.
Hmm.
I ended up getting a really good scholarship, which is what allowed me us to afford it. And my year at Biola was not a successful year.
What went wrong?
So pretty much everything. For starters, I auditioned for the choir, the big choir. I
Right?
couldn't even get into the big choir.
Wow.
I auditioned for, I think, what was the Arthur Miller play, not Death of a Salesman, but about the witches, that one. And I thought I was really good. I didn't get the part.
Hmm.
Um, I joined a rock band as their bass player, and I was such a bad bass player that the band actually broke up so they wouldn't have to fire me.
Wow.
And then on top of that, everything else, I lost my scholarship. So I had to come back to Denver, go to state school, Colorado University at Boulder, and um, and that was where I started taking film classes along with music classes. And by the time I graduated, I was equally interested in film as I was in music, but I thought it'd probably be better to be have a band in my 20s and be a filmmaker in my 50s than the reverse. So I prioritized music, but then once I got my record contract, MTV was just starting to be a thing, and so the record label gave me $5,000 to make my first music video,
Hmm.
and I was able to kind of keep one foot in both worlds until I switched over more to filmmaking in
Were
the
you really thinking that far ahead that I could be a artist first and tour and then slow down and be a filmmaker? Is that really your thought process at the time?
I think yeah, I think that's actually true because I
That's
really was
amazing.
into filmmaking. I knew I wanted to get into that eventually, um
But
but yeah, I also
that's some pretty serious foresight there because it does get harder to tour in your 30s, probably, and 40s and 50s.
right, yes. And there's always new stuff coming along, and uh, yeah, so it worked out fine.
So you always had a passion for filmmaking that was lurking behind the music as you were recording albums.
Yeah, I was mistaken in thinking I thought filmmaking would be a lot easier than it actually ended up being. So,
Hmm.
because when you're doing music videos, all of us that do music videos think we're making little miniature movies, and really all we're doing is adding images to a pre-recorded soundtrack.
Right.
So, and my film school was strictly avant-garde filmmaking. I didn't know it at the time, but when I signed up for the film classes, you weren't allowed to tell stories. They were into the guru of the program was Stan Brakhage. At the time, he was America's preeminent avant-garde filmmaker, and so of course the first film I made was a satire on avant-garde filmmaking, which I'm not sure anybody particularly appreciated, and and. Uh, and but that kind of filmmaking probably was a help for music videos, but I didn't learn anything about narrative filmmaking. So all that came from trial and error.
So you studied that in Colorado at university.
Yeah, it was like the equivalent of like a minor, a film minor.
So you attended your father's alma mater, and then you lost your scholarship. So how bad of a blow is that? How disappointing was that to the family and to you and to the plans?
Yeah, my parents were so patient and always supportive. You know, my dad gave me the musicians are a dime a dozen lecture at one point, but it was very kind of lightweight, you know, and they were huge supporters once I got into music and were always supportive of everything I did. So yeah.
So you're then you recorded your first record. Was it "I Want to Be a Clone"?
Right.
Was
Yes.
it an EP or a full album back
It
then?
was an EP. Yeah. I think Sparrow Records at the time uh, felt like there was some potential here, but they didn't want to risk like doing a full album. So they thought an EP would be a good way to go. And that turned out to be fine.
So this is what year is this?
This was 1982 that I got signed.
Right.
So I'd not performed live before with a band. So I put a band together and I got a two-song slot at this Christian artist seminar that happened in the Rocky Mountains every summer.
Right.
And they let me do two songs at lunch. And Billy Ray Hearn, the head of the record label, was in the audience. I'm not sure that he necessarily got it, but the crowd was really into it. Billy Ray didn't know that half the crowd was my friends. And so when I left the stage, he literally met me getting off the stage and said, I want to do a record with you.
Wow. Wow. So that's an EP. Then that leads to a full record and then more records after that.
Right.
And I think it was, what was the next one? Meltdown.
Yes.
Meltdown. I mean, by the way, I was thinking of in the shower today, I was thinking about this interview and thinking about classic lines in music. And as I was making the Reagan movie, you know, I thought about Don Henley's genius line against Reagan. They're beating plowshares into swords for this tired old man that we elected king.
All right.
And so I would put in that category your slight put down of Bob Dylan.
All right.
What was that again? Dylan may be filling the puddle they designed. Is it going to take a miracle to make up his mind?
Yes.
So you had these little clever one-liners from the very beginning. You had this great satirical way of writing, of making fun of things. Where did that come from?
Um, my dad was a Baptist pastor. He was a more conservative pastor in a more liberal denomination. He was an American Baptist minister. And if he didn't like something that the denomination was doing, he had no problem, you know, sending out 2,000 letters to every pastor on the denomination's list. I know this because lots of times I would be the one who put the stamps on the letters. And so he was a great guy, but you know, he was a bit of a, what do you call that? A
Rabble rouser?
contrarian. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And always did it in a nice, respectful way. But you know, he was good with turning a phrase and knew how to write a letter to get people riled up. And so I probably got some of it from that. But probably more so the music that really I connected with during college was punk rock, and particularly a band, The Clash from England.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really good at turning a phrase, and they were essentially writing protest music. And I thought I would love to do something like that, but I would also like to offer some hope from my Christian faith. So that was sort of the combination.
And Dylan at the time, nobody was quite sure what he believed, so he was ripe for your mockery.
Oh man, my manager at the time, he was really upset about that line. And so the compromise was, because the original line was, Dylan is a fill in the puddle they designed. It was more of like a statement. And so I turned it into a question, and that made my manager a little bit happier. So
Well, yeah, we're endlessly fascinated by Bob Dylan. I'll just tell you, you know, he gave me a song for the movie, and I heard later. I didn't go to the session because the sessions are very, you know, private, intimate affairs. But somebody told me later that he went he left the session for a while and went over to the Songwriters Museum and went to the front entrance there's a girl at the front there, and he was asking her like, how do you become a songwriter? And she didn't recognize him and gave him a little pamphlet on how to become a songwriter and about the museum. And
That's
he was laughing. I think he enjoys those kind of encounters.
yeah. Well, I mean, of course, at that time, there's stuff I wrote back then that I wouldn't write today. And one of the things that I love about Bob Dylan is that he's not going to be anybody's poster boy.
No.
And the other thing I liked is that, one of the things that they talked about that I didn't understand at the time was they asked him if he believed in incarnation, and he responded to the affirmative because I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, he used some examples that those people are still around. And that's like a perfect answer, but I was too thick at the time to understand, kind of the sardonic way that he would answer questions.
Okay, so your father is a contributing factor to your sense of irony and all that good stuff. And it does seem like I think over the years, looking over, and we'll talk more about the film work and things, but it seems like you were always ready to poke fun at pretty much anybody. There were no really sacred cows. You would make fun of people on your team, another team. It didn't really seem to make a difference. And it seems like you also maybe have your own compass, and you don't mind deviating from one team or another. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I felt like there's plenty of hypocrisy in the world. Christians don't have a lock on hypocrisy, and it only felt fair that it would, be trained on whatever seemed like a good target. Of course, my fellow Christians, there were a fair number that were like, "Why are you showing our dirty laundry to the rest of the world?" And my response is, "Oh, they see it. They just think we don't see it."
Yeah, because you think about it, you did a song that was about euthanasia, and then a few years later, you turn around and you write a song making fun of people who bomb abortion clinics.
Right.
So you're an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah. I think a lot of it just has to do with when Christians start believing that the ends justify the means. That's kind of been a recurring theme that that does not. I think that's a hard thing to square with the teachings of Jesus.
Of course, everybody, we all fall into that trap, right? It's not just, I mean, all people, I think, we have that tendency to have a double standard for those we disagree with.
Yes.
But yeah, what was the, I think there were some controversial things along the way. There was the album cover of one of them. There was that song. You've endured your share of controversy, but here's an interesting question for you. What would it be like today in this hyper-connected world? In your day, controversy meant you got like letters from little old grandmas from Arkansas, but what would it have been like today to endure those kinds of things you endured?
Oh, I think it would be very different because it would all be online and social media, and the volume of it would be, exponential.
Yeah, yeah. And when would you say? So you began in the Christian music world. You had a couple of records, and we should talk about maybe what mid '80s would you say was that when you were selling the most records and most out there? What would you say would be that point in time where you were at your peak in the music industry in that way?
Yeah, probably around the Meltdown and on the Fritz albums, and then. This is a long time ago, but you remember the televangelist scandals of the late 80s.
Right.
And the Christian record labels felt at that point like they needed to respond kind of en masse to say, hey, we're not like that. We're still part of the church, and essentially reassure the church that we were on their team.
Right.
And I did not feel that I needed to do that. So I made an album that I predict 1990 that was very much counter to the kind of prevailing winds within American Christianity at the time, and that album, probably made a lot of people mad.
How so? Was it the content or just the cover and all
It
that?
started with the cover. A lot of people thought it looked like a tarot card, which I still don't quite see that, but what are you going to do? And then there was a song I blew up the clinic real good, which was satire about the absurdity of someone claiming to be a Christian and blowing up an abortion clinic, and at the end doesn't justify the means. That was also around the time of the Iran Contra hearings, and I didn't like the fact that kind of the main spokesman for that was I forget his name now.
Oliver North.
Oliver North. I didn't. I felt like he was justifying lying, and I didn't like that. And so there was kind of an undercurrent in some of the songs about that. And what else? There was a song. Well, that was on the prior album. There was a song on the Fritz, which kind of got a lot of people upset about, called "I Manipulate." That was a not so veiled screed against Bill Gothard and his basic youth concepts. And I thought,
well, you were 35 years ahead of that one.
Yeah, well, what did Confucius say? A man cannot conceal himself, or something like that. So, yeah, these things all tend to come out in the wash eventually.
I really loved "Harder to Believe Than Not To." I think that was from that record. But
yes,
how do I say this? I also really loved Fleming and John's version of "Harder to Believe Than Not To."
I actually like theirs better. So,
well, I wasn't going to say that, but they're both great. But you wrote it, so there's something special about her name. By the way, thinking of Fleming and John, when you the next phase of your career is as a record mogul, trying to be ethical and honest in the record business.
Right.
And I'm trying to think if I can say that maybe I found Sixpence None the Richer before you did. But anyway, in the early 90s, my friend Gavin Morkel had this label called REX.
Yes.
And he's like, "Can you help me, put these records out?" Because I used to put out records in Japan. And I listened to his entire catalog, and like, there's nothing really here except Sixpence None the Richer and Fleming and John. I'm like, I don't know who these people are, but these two are incredible. I don't know how you stumbled upon these, Gavin, but anyway, it was so funny that it was The Fatherless and the Widow, and then there was the next one that had Angel Tread on it.
This Beautiful Mess, I think.
Yeah, but anyway, well, the fun part was I tried to get record deals for those artists, and nobody was interested. But then a few years later, after you discovered them and put them on the map and released Kiss Me, suddenly all those same record executives were like, "Oh, this is genius." And I'm like, wait a minute. 3 years ago, the same artist, and you couldn't hear it.
Right.
But anyway,
and I did not discover them. They had already done two great records, and they wanted me to produce their next album. And it was one of the first times before then, I only liked to work with artists who hadn't done good records before. So that was nerve-wracking to do an album with Sixpence, because they'd already done two really good records.
So you launched your label with their third record, I believe.
Right.
Right. And
that was not the plan. It was that while we were getting, kind of doing pre-production on their next album, their independent label REX went out of business, went bankrupt.
Right.
And so and the new boss, some lawyer from Chicago, was just not a good guy. And so and the band was ready to break up. So I said, "Hey, let's just finish the album. I'll put it on my credit cards, but we got to just make music, because you guys are going to break up otherwise."
Wow.
And so, and then, the whole experience, they were like, "We don't really trust anybody. Would you want to figure this out for us?" So that's how the label started.
So that's how, and you called your label Squint.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you did the you helped us out with the Japan release, and
Yeah,
you knew Stephen Prendergast, who
yeah.
did a great job on. He was the one who heard "Kiss Me" and said, that's a hit."
Now, did
And
did did Matt not want to record it, or there was somebody that didn't want
yeah,
wasn't into it?
no, no, Matt. If you heard the demo of "Kiss Me," you probably wouldn't recognize it. It almost sounded like a dirge.
Wow.
It was slower and kind of melancholy, and so, but the melody was interesting, and the lyrics were very different. And so we're in the studio, and Matt's in the control room with me playing guitar, and Dale's playing drums, and Lee's singing a scratch vocal, and JJ, the bass player, they're all in the studio, and we just hit this groove, and it's like I was thinking, oh yeah, that's what it is. And I turned around to see Matt, and he just had this look on his face. He was not into it at all.
Really?
So I said, hey man, it's your record. You guys get to make the call, but
Hmm.
uh, can you just trust me on this? I think we should keep working on this. And
Wow.
then he also went through. And again, this is all to Matt's credit because I didn't think the lyrics were up to snuff, and so it's like I was grading papers. He'd give me a copy of the lyrics. I'd go through, cross a bunch of stuff out, give it back to him, and say, "Hey, keep going, hey, keep working." We went through multiple revisions until we finally got to the final version.
Boy, he has millions of reasons to thank you for that decision, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's always been gracious, as the whole band has been. But as you know, hit records are a mixed blessing, and as for all the good things that Kiss Me did, it also makes it so, oh, now you're a top 40 act, and now you got to come up with a follow-up single,
Yeah.
and now you're not being taken seriously at college radio because you're on the top 40. And so it's a tough one because they were a really great band, and they were really kind of an interesting alternative band. But Kiss Me, which I would still argue was a fantastic pop single and
Yeah.
smarter than most pop singles at the time, certainly. But it still, was like a massive hit, and those are great to have. I think most artists would rather have a hit than not have a hit,
Right.
and at the same time, uh, they're also hard to live down.
Yeah, but I've never seen or met a writer who is so capable. I mean, he really writes so well for her.
Yeah,
It's really remarkable. And
yeah.
I mean, on songs like "Melody of You," you
Oh, I love that
really
song.
the way he turns a phrase. Um, yeah, interesting
Yeah,
that you were interesting that you were there, sort of, help prodding him along. But he's just a remarkable writer and a human being. Of course, you're
yeah, and that was not the case with most of the songs. This
Mhm.
"Kiss Me" was kind of an exception
Right.
because usually Matt would come in, play a song. It's like, well, that's fantastic. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So "Kiss Me" was kind of an outlier in that
But
regard.
but even that one, there's some interesting phrases there, like "We'll take the trail marked on your father's map." It just feels rich with symbolism and imagery and whatever that means. That's an
Yes.
interesting turn of a phrase that isn't. Have you heard the new what's that new version of that somebody recorded, that young artist recorded?
No,
Uh,
like that.
Paris. No, I'll have to send it to
Oh
you later.
no. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Something about Paris Moonlight or something like that. It's a really interesting take on it.
Yeah. That
Um,
song, it's like it's arguably as popular now as it was when it came out.
right.
And Taylor Swift, what's the first song you ever learned on
Yep, learn
guitar?
the
Kiss
guitar
Me.
on. Yeah.
SZA does a
And
cover.
no, also Kanye.
Oh, I
Kanye.
didn't know that.
There's this clip of Kanye talking all about how great "Kiss Me" was and "Sixpence None the Richer." I'm like, what in the world?
I had no idea.
But it's also a commentary on sort of sadness of what's happened to music. In the fact that "Last Christmas" and Mariah's song are the number one Christmas songs 40 years later. I mean,
Yes.
that's nice. It makes us feel good about the '80s, but it's also sad that they don't have their own music because the
Yes.
music industry has disappeared and they have to listen to Wham. Uh,
Those
you
are
know,
those are two songs I'm good to never hear again.
okay,
There are
yeah,
people that are like that with Kiss Me.
Yeah. Well, so you had okay, so you launched the label. It's very successful out of the gate, and then we had a chance to work together on some things. But then you signed bands like Chevelle, which
Right.
was a really interesting hard rock, new metal type act out of Chicago, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And then you went for a while. How did that? What was that like? And I mean, eventually you ran out of steam with the label, but what was that process like for you? And did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed the first year of it probably. And it really wasn't successful out of the gate. We worked the album came out and their fans bought it, but then it just dropped off completely. And so it was a full year of working Kiss Me, where the band worked really hard and they visited radio stations and they did all the things. But the reason Kiss Me ultimately became a hit is because I signed a one-off deal with a ska group called the Insiders that did a album of ska praise music called Scalleluja,
Hmm.
and that was a hit within kind of the Christian market. And
Hmm.
if it wouldn't have been for the success of that album, I don't think we would have gotten the funds to keep working Kiss Me for a year.
Wow.
So um, all those things kind of work together, and bands, they don't recognize all the things that go on behind the scenes
Right.
to make it possible to keep working or not keep working an
Right.
album.
They think they
Um,
woke up on third base. Right.
well, I'm not saying who thinks that, but yes, it does happen.
Right. Um,
So
so then what other artists did you have? You had the Insiders. You had
Chevelle,
Chevelle.
Burlap to Cashmere, we
Yeah.
signed
Yeah.
a distribution deal with them, even though they're already signed to A&M,
Right.
and that was a big success for us. And then a band Waterdeep that I'm
Yep.
still close to,
Okay.
and then the very last thing we did was what happened was everything was going fine, and then the parent company changed leadership,
Right.
and
Right.
the new owner. Actually, this is a story that I've told before, but I had signed a hip hop collective, LA Symphony, that was
Yep.
going to be our next big thing, and they
Yep.
were fantastic. And so when I met with the new CEO of Gaylord Entertainment,
Right.
he said, "So, what do you got cooking?" And I said, "Well, I've told him about this new hip hop collective." And he was a country music guy, and he said, "Well, when do I get to hear the demos?" And I said, "Well, if you're a big hip hop fan, I'm happy to have you listen to them, but you know that I don't take outside, I'm not, I did it in a nice way, but I wanted to know I'm not really interested in your take on hip hop songs." And he
Right.
was like, "Well, surely you don't think I'm just going to let you sign whatever you want?" I said, "Well, yeah, that's the deal I have." And the next day he put the company up for sale. So
Ouch.
yeah, so
Wow.
that was the beginning of the end for Squint.
Yeah. But somehow we skipped over in this sequence your Chagall Guevara record,
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
right, before this.
Yes.
So you signed, I think, with MCA, if I recall.
Yes. Right.
And I remember you telling me at the time that this was your shot. I mean, this was your shot at the Clash style rock stardom, right? So you get this,
Yeah.
you put a great band together, you make what you probably think is a great record, and
Right.
then you just didn't really feel the love from the label from MCA, as I recall.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot, a lot. It happens all the time. But MCA hadn't broken a rock band in a number of years, and uh, they made us a really good deal. So we signed there, and we had great people, A&R people working with us, and then a new guy came in and fired our one of our A&R people, and everything changed. And that stuff happens all the time, but when you're in the middle of it, it's particularly painful. And so the album was a really good album, and we were a really good live band, but the record label the record label, as unsuccessful as we were still more successful than all their other unsuccessful rock bands. So MCA wanted us to do a second album,
Hmm.
and we were not interested at all. So it was like a year long standoff.
Wow.
And And during that year, the band ultimately ended up breaking up before we finally got out of that deal.
Now, I think there were people that weren't crazy about your religious beliefs too, as I recall. I
Right.
think you told me one time you ordered some pizza
Yes.
for them, and what, tell that story.
Yes, yes. We're at MCA, and we had waited so long for the limo to pick us up at LAX that we ended up, I think we ended up ordering a pizza and having it delivered to the place we were going to get picked up. And we're telling the story to our A&R team, and one of our A&R people said, "Well, I hope it wasn't Domino's." And I was like, "What's the matter with Domino's?" And she said, "Oh, well, they're owned by those Nazis who you know are against abortion." And my mother had just gotten arrested protesting outside an abortion clinic. So I said, "Yeah, Teresa, they're not all Nazis." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, they are." And so we ended up having a pretty intense argument for the next 20 minutes while we're trying to, talk to different people at the label. And we finally had to call a truce because, we had to figure out album covers and things like that.
Yeah, what was her
But
job with for the
she
record?
was what she was our A&R person, one of our two
Okay, there
A&R
you
people.
go. Good job,
Right.
Steve.
Yeah, but I loved her, and we ended up becoming really good friends. And yeah, she ended up being one of my favorite people. So
Okay, so she didn't hold back. She did not promote the record.
no, 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 she was awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it was very critically acclaimed, as I recall.
Right.
It
Yes.
just didn't reach its audience, and for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah.
So then we fast forward to where we were for a little digression into the Sixpence era. But then you move once that sort of slows down. You're move into filmmaking.
Right.
You've directed a number of movies since then. So I just find it interesting that the conversation at the very beginning about music first, and I can always come back to film later. I'm thinking of someone like Dennis Quaid, where he comes to Hollywood and he really wanted to do music, but he gets diverted and goes into acting instead.
Right.
And it's like, could he have been like the Bruce Spring? If things had been differently, would he have been our Bruce Springsteen of that era if he hadn't gone into acting? It's very it's so fascinating the way we go back and forth between music and film and other genres.
Yeah. I just saw last night. I watched Tender Mercies again, and Duvall. That was his Academy Award
Yep.
for, um, and he played a country singer, Max Sledge, and he was so good. And at the end, I'm watching the credits, and he wrote two of the songs as well.
Robert
So
Duvall did.
Duval did, yeah. So there's
Really?
always there's been such a back and forth with musicians who want to be movie stars and movie stars who want to have bands. It's kind of a constant thing, and they both have their appeal. But I think, yeah, I think music just does something. I gotta believe that one of the reasons movie stars like to be in bands is because they get a little bit more control over their destinies, at least as far
Mm.
as what gets recorded and you're
Mm.
playing live and all those things that you don't necessarily get when you're starring in someone else's movie.
Well, that's interesting. So you're out front, you're in control of your destiny, you're not on a set somewhere, days on end, waiting for the call.
Yeah. That
Mm.
was one of the things in working with actors. I didn't come into filmmaking having the highest regard for actors kind of as a species. And I that quickly changed on that because I realized just how little control actors have over so many aspects of their career, how they're waiting to get cast, and when they get cast for something, they really don't know why they got the part and someone else didn't get the part.
Right.
And it just is a craft that would breed so much insecurity and even paranoia and frustration. And so I really admire actors, people that are good at it, because it takes a lot to do that well.
That's so true. I think that's why actors are wanting to know who the director is going to be because you're putting your life in that person's hands, basically.
Right.
And
Yeah.
even after the movie's shot, now you're putting your hands in marketing people's
Right.
hands, your life in their hands,
Right.
and they could screw it up. You
Yes.
know, I was a part of a movie called Little Boy, and it was such a beautifully shot movie and intricate and deep. And all of a sudden, when Mark and Roma joined as executive producers, it became like, oh, the Home Alone for religious people. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is like three Mexican filmmakers who made this amazing, deep film.
Right.
And now it's being thought of in this way. And
Yeah.
so you're right. There's so many different ways that an actor can have their work misinterpreted or going in a different direction or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you have a unique vantage point because you've been on both sides of all these things. You've been behind the camera, in front of the camera in terms of music. You've been an executive. What do all those experiences do? How does it make you a different person in those jobs?
Well, hopefully it gives me a lot of empathy for the people that I'm working with. And it goes both ways. I'm getting ready to go on tour Sunday and bringing my band out. And the band's also going to back up Russ Taff, who's one of my all-time favorite singers. And the tour promoter, like, I want this to be a really good tour. But honestly, my number one goal is to make sure the tour promoter doesn't lose money on this tour.
Hmm.
Like the people, managers, like I just think managers, they have the worst job in entertainment. And I have so much uh, respect and empathy for what they have to go through. So I think one of the things it's done is it's helped me understand and appreciate something that I didn't necessarily understand or appreciate, which is how difficult all these jobs are and how hard it is to maintain integrity in these different jobs, and how hard it is for an artist to put their fate into an executive's hands, and why it can breed distrust or even paranoia. It's just a hard thing because our lawyers would tell me, "Hey, Steve, what are you getting so upset about? It's just business." It's like, not to me. It's way more personal. It's way more about the art than it is about the commerce to me. And I know most of the people that I work with feel the same way. The thought that it's just business is nonsense.
Mm.
But on the other hand, as my one of my producers, film producers, used to remind me, Steve, there's no such thing as an entertainment emergency. So I, in the grand scheme of things, we're not curing cancer or solving hunger or anything like that. We're telling stories that we hope will affect people in positive ways, but it's not the same as people that are doing the more important work.
But you don't, in our line of work, you most of the time you don't hear how things impacted people, right?
Right.
They don't
Yeah.
write letters, you don't I didn't write a letter to so and so because I heard a song. It's just part of who I am, and they'll never know. A lot of you'll be unacknowledged for in this lifetime, probably for most of the people you impacted, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Talk about this the new project you're doing with Russ Taff.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting. I have a bit of a unique vantage point because I would take a lot of these records that were on Sparrow and Word and Benson, and I would pick up the rights years later and re-release them internationally.
Oh, right.
And what I found really remarkable is there's a total lack of institutional memory or appreciation for these artists.
Right.
And that's not the norm in the normal mainstream music world.
Yeah.
And I think of the example of I went to Word years ago and I said, I want to license Bruce Hibbard's record, Never Turning Back from 1980, which I thought was a great record. And I thought the whole world thought it was a great record. And the people
Yeah.
at Word were like, who's that?
Oh, wow.
He was on your label 30 years ago. And like,
Right.
oh, well, we don't know where that is. I said, well, I found it they're all in the basement at Word. I said, well, go
Right.
look in the basement. And so they found the masters, and then I would pay them a fee and I would license it. And then I would meet people like Bruce, and they were
Yeah.
totally forgotten.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that? Why is there no institutional memory, and why is there no appreciation that there is in the mainstream world for these artists?
Yeah. That question, I live in Nashville now, and I'm not in the country music world at all, but I noticed that country music and country music musicians ask that same question a lot. And they have made, as a as an industry, they've made a more concerted effort toward that, probably to honor their, forebears. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. What happened with Russ was I had known him in the '80s and '90s, and we fallen out of touch a bit. And, he has had very public struggles with alcoholism and has now been sober, I think, for the last 14 years. But the band that brought me to Nashville, Chagall Guevara, that we were talking about, we did a reunion show. And for people who paid a crazy amount of money for premium tickets, we decided to do an after party the next night at Jack White's club in town, the Blue Room. And we said it'd be a jam session. We'd be bringing some friends, and we asked Russ to join us. And he came that night and sang a version of a song he'd recorded prior, Charlie Peacock's "Down in the Lowlands," but did it like as a blues kind of rave up with members of Chagall Guevara and some other friends. And man, he just brought the house down. It was like going to church. And afterwards, I think all of us were saying, hey, why doesn't he do an album where he does that? And so that's what ended up happening. My friend John Painter, who's a longtime collaborator, Fleming and John, had grown up listening to Russ Taff and heard him sing in church in Nashville and knew his voice really well. And so he and I collaborated and got with Russ, and we decided, let's do an album of cover songs, similar to what Johnny Cash did later in life. And but let's tell his story through cover songs. And so that's where the project came about, and it's called Cover Story.
But what you're doing is what a label typically would do. You know what I mean? If
Yeah,
whoever has Russ's catalog, I mean,
I would think. I mean, the heads of labels change so often, and they're there to make business decisions as well. And Christian music in particular has changed dramatically to where it's much more about church music and worship music. So I understand why they wouldn't necessarily be thinking in terms of, well, let's look at our catalog of great artists that have gone before. That I don't think they necessarily think that way.
okay. Well, you think that way, and so you're making sure that the next generation hears someone like Russ Taff,
Yeah,
who has an amazing voice.
got an amazing voice and an amazing story. You know, I had another friend who was reminding me today. It might have been an Amy Grant concert, and he was standing on the sidelines with Amy's agent, and they were listening to Russ Taff, who I think was opening for Amy. And the agent said, that's the one guy who, if the Christian music industry didn't exist, he would have been able to get a record deal anyway. I
Mm.
think, there's definitely some truth to that.
Yeah, yeah. He had so many great records, and he had different incarnations. It was kind
Yeah,
of his pop period, and then there was this more bluesy period.
right.
But the record, the black and white record of him standing on the ocean, that
Love that
was
album. Self-titled album. Yeah.
yeah, that was a really amazing record. I think, did Dave Perkins produce that record?
No, Lynn Nichols, the other
Nichols.
artist in the band, other
Okay.
guitar player in the band, produced it. But Dave wrote the song "Walk Between the Lines" for
Right,
Russ, and might
right.
have played on some of the album too.
Yeah, a lot of your circle of people were part of those records, right?
Right. Yeah.
And Nichols and Dave Perkins. Dave Perkins produced Randy Stonehill's record, the High Kick record, or whatever that was called.
Yes, that's right. That
Um,
was a really good album too.
and then Dave had a great solo record too.
He did.
Um,
It was
so
fantastic.
yeah, no, the more I think about it, you've had a coterie of musicians around you and artists around you in different ways. And I'm sure you've impacted them a lot, and maybe they've impacted you a little bit too.
Absolutely.
Um, but so that brings us to kind of today. So the last decade of your life, you directed a movie called Blue Like Jazz.
Right. Yes.
What have been the highlights of this last, let's just say this last decade?
Right. Well, Blue Like Jazz was a while back, and it was not a commercial success. I'm still reasonably happy with the album, with the project. It was the movie that I wanted to make, so all the mistakes were mine. But it was definitely not in sync with kind of, even though it was a faith-based movie, it was not at all like the types of movies that were being made.
Right, right.
And it premiered at South by Southwest, and just but did not get a warm reaction within the church. I think that's fair to say. And I've continued to work in filmmaking, but the last two projects have been as a producer, not director. The most recent one was a movie written and directed by my friend Seth Worley, and it's called Sketch. And this is bragging, but if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, you check out all the wide releases of 2025.
Yeah.
Best rated movie, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is Sinners. Sketch is actually the third best rated movie.
By
And
critics or fans?
by critics. Fans, that's easy. Critics, that's almost impossible.
I wouldn't know anything about critical review, good review.
But it's just a great movie. And Tony Hale is the star of it. He does a great job. And it's got three adorable kids. And it's kind of like we call it a cross between Inside Out and Jurassic Park, which is a pretty good description of it. 10-year-old Amber is having difficulties, and we find out it's because her mother had died 6 months earlier, and her dad, played by Tony Hale, is concerned about her, so he takes her to a child psychologist, and the counselor finds out that Amber likes to draw, so she gives her a sketchbook and says, I want you to put all your feelings inside this sketchbook. And so Amber goes to town and draws all these comically horrific monsters who, of course, then come alive and terrorize everybody. And but it's actually a really good and touching and really funny movie.
Now, why didn't you direct these movies? Why did you move to producing them?
Well, in that case, I'd worked with Seth for almost 20 years. In fact, he'd done second unit on Blue Like Jazz and the Second Chance movies that I directed. And he was just ready. He'd done a lot of stuff and was ready to go. And then the one prior to that was a movie for Sony Affirm called Sun Moon that my grad assistant, it was kind of based on her life story of the season between college and grad school where she taught English in the mountains of Taiwan. And so we shot that primarily in Taiwan, and it turned out well as well. And but producing is like, I just say it's like filmmaking minus all the fun parts, as you probably well know. So I'm ready to get back to directing.
Yeah. Well, I think the opposite. I think directing is just too much work.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting up at 5 a.m. on the set, and like, I don't want to get up at 5 a.m.
Right.
Kidding?
Yes. Right.
Slide in at 9.
Oh man, I've never been more tired than when I was directing, especially like the first week. It's like how there was a great behind the scenes documentary of Sofia Coppola directing The Virgin Suicide, and they're interviewing her mom, and her mom's like, look at her, she looks so tired, which she did. It's pretty exhausting work.
Yeah. Well, what do you have? What's on the horizon? What do you want to do after this tour and after this settles on the film side? What do you want to do next?
Yes. Well, right now I'm also producing a new animated series by the VeggieTales co-creator Mike Naraki, who's also the voice of Larry the Cucumber and wrote the majority of those great silly songs. And he had an idea for a series about a 10-year-old boy whose dad is an archaeologist. So the series opens at the Dead Sea in Israel, where his dad's doing a dig. And Michael, his son, gets bored, so he wanders into a nearby cave. He finds 2 dead salt-encrusted squirrels that he thinks are cool, so he smuggles them back home to Nashville in his backpack, and he puts them in the window to air out. It rains that night. The squirrels get wet. They reanimate. Now you got 2 squirrels who were alive during Jesus' time. Hijinks ensue, and of course, it's called the Dead Sea Squirrels. And so that's the season 1 is already out, and we're working on season 2. And animation is like a whole different thing for me. I'd never done it before. It takes forever, but it's been really fun working with Mike. He's one of my favorite people. And then he ended up casting me as the singing Apostle Paul and as a talking donkey, which is, typecasting evidently on both of those. So I'm doing that. And I've got a movie that I think I told you about. It's been long in gestation, that imagines, it's a stretch, but imagine our country being so polarized that a renegade Freemason decides the only solution is to bring George Washington back to the present day in a time machine and have him run for president under assumed name as an independent.
Oh my
And so the
goodness.
movie is called The Independent. And we maybe still do, Kenan Thompson was attached to play his campaign manager. It's like a buddy movie. But, Kenan, as a black man who takes the job for the money, he's got some issues about George's
Slave
past.
owning past.
Exactly. So it's a really funny movie. It's actually co-written by Seth Worley, who wrote and directed Sketch, and so that's the one I'm hoping to get off the ground. We'll see.
What do you think AI is going to do to all of our creative processes? Do you have any idea at this point?
I think about this a lot
I do
because
too.
I also, I teach film at Lipscomb University here in Nashville, and AI is something that we've all had to wrestle with in a really, big way because we want our students to be prepared for the world that they're going to be entering. Um, it's certainly going to impact filmmaking. We just don't know how fast and how much.
Right.
But I'm of two minds. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, and I'm grateful for the health insurance that that provides. And every movie that I've done has been we've been a signatory for SAG-AFTRA. But I also know that money is the main issue with filmmaking. You're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars to make an album. You're talking about usually millions of dollars,
Right.
uh, and artists want to make things. And so if AI helps achieve their goals and makes it, less expensive, as long as they're still in charge, I think they're going to use the tools that they have available to get the things they want to make, right? And so we know it's going to affect filmmaking. Oh geez, famous actor just signed a deal. Ben Affleck just signed a deal with Netflix, and they took his AI production company, and he's saying that this is ethical AI, that you use it as a filmmaker, you feed it the what you're filming, and then it makes post production faster and helps the process along, and it's a way to save money as well. So we're going to see it affecting just about everything. Weirdly enough, probably the safest bet you can get into as a film as an artist these days is live theater. That's probably not going to change much. Just about everything else is going to change.
Yeah, I don't even think we fully comprehend how it's going to change. But I can just tell you, even in the development process of scripts right now, it's taking 6 months of work and getting it done in half an hour. I
Right.
mean, it's a shocker just in terms of developing storylines, or if I'll say add this character, it knows everything about that character if it's a historical character.
Right.
And but I still think you need the human touch, right?
Right.
It's like you need a human to write the screenplay after all this research is done. And I don't know. I still yeah, but
Yeah.
maybe we're deluding ourselves though.
Well, we may be. What I hope is that, humans still write scripts and humans still do the acting, and that there are artists involved in every aspect. But I can also see, in the case of, say, animation, there's just so many parts of animation that AI is going to be able to do and do faster and arguably as well. That a lot of that stuff is kind of drudgery work anyway, compositing and things like that. Those are kind of the low level jobs that animation students get offered first. And I fear for the workforce because I think it's going to start paring down, but who knows? Maybe it'll make it so that a lot of artists will be able to make stuff and do great work that they wouldn't have been able to do because, well, it's like what we've seen in music. When I was coming up, we would have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to make a quality album because you had to go to recording studios.
Right.
And, the process has become very democratic and way less expensive. So we may see the same thing happen with filmmaking. We're already seeing it on some level.
Yeah, the great sort of the democratization of all these things, right? I mean, even the podcast world, it's like all these guests that would have been blocked by a producer on the Tonight Show or whatever it might have been.
Right.
It's a free for all now, so that
Right.
you take the good with the bad. I miss the days when there wasn't quite as much anti-Semitism as there is now, but
Yes.
that's the deal, right? We've allowed a low bar. Now there's nobody manning the gates to keep bad stuff from coming out as well.
Right.
Yeah. Any
World is
thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, well, the world is certainly less curated.
That's
But
That's a great phrase. Yeah.
that's also a good thing.
Right.
You're right. Plenty of bad things come with it, but plenty of good things come with it as well. And as a Christian in the 80s and 90s, I felt like I was always banging my head against the wall because kind of the mainstream entertainment world just did not want to hear about it.
Yeah.
And I think even with Sixpence, we encountered a lot of resistance just because they were known as Christians and they were categorized and written off, and it was just really frustrating and frankly maddening.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of lack of curation by the media elite, if you want to call it, has been refreshing. And
Before I let you go, just as we wind down, I wanted to ask you about, I think you've seen a lot, probably even in your circle, of deconstruction of people who are walking away from their beliefs, their faith. Some prominent people, I think, in our circles, in your circles. What are your thoughts on that? And I ask it in the context of what I think that's so interesting, and you kind of see it in the Katy Perry family in one unit, where
Right.
I mean, I don't know where she's exactly, but she's obviously on a journey that's been away from what her upbringing was. And then you have her ex-husband, Russell Brand, who is like a kid or a man in a desert who just discovered water. And
Right.
he's so excited. And I asked Katy Perry's mom once, I'm like, did you have anything to do with that? And she's like, well, who do you think's been texting for 15 years? But anyway, the point is, like, that contrast of the people who walk away and the people who were so hungry. What are your thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss anybody's reasons for deconstructing, but I think lots of times it has less to do with the truth of who Jesus is than it has to do with cultural baggage that they feel they don't want to be associated with. And I understand that. And, I've got a lot of frustrations myself these days. But the person of who Jesus is and the fact that I still believe he was physically raised from the dead means that I got nowhere else to go. That's what I believe, and I think there are good reasons for still believing that. So deconstruction, especially when it happens with friends, it's sad and sometimes frustrating. But I don't think the fundamentals of the Christian faith have changed, and that's why I'm still a small O Orthodox Christian.
I just think Russell in particular is hilarious because he'll come on his show and he will, say like Galatians 2:12, and he is so excited about Galatians 2:12. And you and I have heard that verse for 40 years, and we're like, eh. And just to see the excitement in his eyes of this new discovery, and it does put it in a different lens for me too. I'm like, well, that is kind of cool. Yeah, I've forgotten how cool Galatians 2:12 was. And I think it's helpful for all of us to see it through those fresh set of eyes, because it can get dull, and for
Right.
for those who've been around it a long
Right.
time.
Yeah, my wife and I are doing one of those things where we read through the Bible in 2 years, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Even growing up in a pastor's home, there's a lot of stuff that I think, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
What's
And
what's that? When I think of you, I was thinking like, what would summarize your career and some of the work you've done? What would you say a song would be? Or I think of the line from you. I just want to stay angry at the evil. I just want to be, was it hungry for the good? Something like
hungry
that.
for the true, yeah.
The truth. Yeah.
Right.
What would, what summarizes when we put that tombstone together for you, what would you want it to say? How do you want to be remembered for your entire body of work that we've kind of skimmed over today?
Well, that's a nice one. I like that one. Uh, I was just listening to my friend Lee Camp was interviewing Catholic father and writer Ron Rolheiser, and he said as you get older, which I certainly am, uh, it's two things. It's gratitude and forgiveness, and uh, I still get angry about plenty of things, and there's still plenty of things that I think, man, I need to write about that or something. But uh, uh, it's all got to fall under those two things of, for me, gratitude and forgiveness. Um, I don't want to be a bitter old person. I want to be gracious and loving and not carry any of that stuff.
Well, Steve, it's been great to visit with you. Thanks for making the time today. Best of luck on the upcoming tour.
Thank you,
And I
Mark.
hope
It's great talking to you.
people that listen to this can catch you along the way. How do they find out the tour dates on this thing?
They just go to rusttaff.com. All the tickets and venues and links are there. So yeah, we start Tuesday in Downey, and then Fresno, and then Bay Area, and then Northern California, and then on up to Washington and Oregon. So it'll be a good tour.
And then look for the George Washington Comes to America and puts a suit
Yes,
on and runs for
yes.
office movie.
Oh man, I gotta say
Sounds
that
good.
script is so good. I just hope we can get it made. We'll see.
Great to be with you.
You too, Mark.
Okay, we'll see you.